Just how pathetic is a man with an overbearing wife? Simply because he raises his voice a little, he receives a sharp slap to the face from his wife. Rage instantly washes over Edward's face, yet the deep-rooted endurance in his bones prevents him from putting up any actual resistance. Seeing her husband act so weak, Grace feels even more annoyed and demands to know why he doesn't fight back, even if it is just to say, "I'm going to unalive you." Confronted by his wife's sheer aggressiveness, he merely offers a cold, detached response. But her husband's completely indifferent attitude only leaves Grace feeling more frustrated, causing her to flip over the kitchen dining table in a fit of rage. Hearing the commotion outside, Jamie rushes over immediately. Taking in the sight of his father sitting silently by the edge of the bed in the room, the shattered mess covering the kitchen floor, and his mother's unappeased fury, Jamie understands in a flash that his parents have undoubtedly had another argument. Yet, he can only helplessly clean up the utensils scattered across the floor, as he has long grown accustomed to such scenes. However, he never guesses in his wildest dreams that his mother's prolonged pressure is about to push this family into the abyss of being completely shattered. Edward is a high school teacher in a small town who is gentle, introverted, and even somewhat soft-spoken. Even if a student zones out during class, he will only offer a well-meaning reminder in a gentle tone. Meanwhile, his wife Grace is a novelist. In stark contrast to Edward's silence, she is passionate and romantic, yet she also possesses an incredibly strong desire for control. She craves emotional resonance and wishes her husband would verbalize his love every single day, just like they were in the honeymoon phase. Two people with such completely polar opposite personalities maintain a seemingly stable married life over the span of 29 years. Every morning, Grace focuses on her writing in front of the computer, while Edward tiptoes into the kitchen to brew her favorite cup of tea, carefully places it right by her hand, and then silently returns to his own seat, so they can both busy themselves with their respective work without bothering each other. He lives each day constantly walking on eggshells, never daring to say an extra word to Grace for fear of accidentally ticking his wife off. To him, this is not so-called pampering, but rather pure tension and fear. Every time he returns home, he has to pause at the doorway for a brief moment, mentally preparing himself to face an imminent argument at any second. This cautious behavior long since permeates every single corner of his life, leaving him thoroughly exhausted both physically and mentally. It is not just Edward, as their son Jamie feels exactly the same way. The suffocating atmosphere drives him to choose to work away from home year-round, never easily returning unless there is an absolute emergency. Even when he occasionally visits, he acts like a complete outsider, warily observing his parents' moods out of fear that he might accidentally get dragged into their disputes. Yet even under these conditions, they manage to reluctantly live together for 29 years. On the very eve of their upcoming 29th wedding anniversary, the marriage they have struggled so hard to maintain is about to shatter completely. Full of anticipation, Grace asks her husband what his plans are, such as going out for a dinner together or taking a stroll around the places they used to date. But Edward merely keeps his head down, tending to the task at hand, and tosses back a casual response. Her husband's cold shoulder leaves Grace feeling deeply disappointed. She feels that a milestone day like this should naturally be brought up by her husband, who ought to value it and sincerely arrange everything. Yet he remains utterly indifferent from beginning to end. She rambles on and on about her expectations for their marriage, longing for Edward to put down whatever he is doing, even if it is just to listen to her attentively or say the words, "I love you." That way, perhaps she would not have to aggressively seek attention like a bitter, resentful woman. Yet Edward remains completely unmoved, even finding Grace's demands to be incredibly childish. Perhaps over these 29 years, Grace's forceful suppression already piles up heavily against his chest, suffocating him to the point where he wants to escape from this place every single day. But Grace never realizes this, as her dominance and controlling nature long push Edward further and further away. Jamie tells his mother not to always hold on to his father so tightly, because doing so will not only backfire, but will also cause cracks to appear in their marriage. However, Grace is not worried at all, because regarding all the arguments that have happened over the past 29 years, they always make up and go back to normal by the very next day. Yet Grace fails to recognize that it is precisely her overbearing nature that makes her husband constantly want to run away, and it even causes Jamie to develop a deep fear of marriage, leaving him too afraid to tie the knot even as he approaches 30. The following morning, Grace goes to church early to pray for their cracking marriage. But she will never imagine in her wildest dreams that Edward can no longer endure these day-in, day-out arguments, and firmly makes up his mind to end this reluctantly maintained marriage. For 29 years, Edward feels like he is living in a cage, suppressing his true self every single day. He tries hard to change into the version that Grace likes, only to discover that he can never meet her standards. Edward then reveals a secret that has been buried deep in his heart for a very long time.
I've fallen in love. What? Her name's Angela.
Although he knows full well that this behavior is unforgivable, the deed is already done, so he plans to confess everything once Grace returns home and then make his departure. Worrying that Grace will not be able to take it after he leaves, Edward begs Jamie to take good care of her once he is gone. Hearing his father's sudden and unexpected decision, Jamie is instantly at a total loss. Because while he understands how much his father suffers in this household over the years, he still tries his best to make his father stay, arguing that even though constant fighting is exhausting, the marriage has not yet reached a point of absolute divorce. But Grace's habitual dominance and their never-ending arguments long cause Edward to lose all faith in this marriage. Not long after, Grace returns from her prayers at the church. Acting as if absolutely nothing happened, she hugs Edward and apologizes for her impulsive behavior from the previous night. But by this time, Edward's heart is already dead as ashes, and faced with his wife's usual display of tenderness and vulnerability, he states his desire to leave without a shred of hesitation. At first, Grace thinks this is an unprecedented transformation in her husband, believing he wants to have a heart-to-heart talk with her. It is not until Edward confesses that he has already fallen in love with a woman named Angela that she gradually senses the sheer gravity of the situation. He knows this is a massive blow to Grace, but he genuinely believes it is the best option moving forward. For so many years, he constantly tries his hardest, trying to figure out how to please Grace, yet it is all in vain because he can never measure up to her standards. Watching the lover she shares 29 years with about to walk away from her, an unspeakable sharp pain suddenly attacks Grace's heart. She simply cannot believe that the man who weathers 29 years of storms by her side will betray their marriage so easily. She urgently begs Edward, for the sake of their many years of sharing joys and sorrows, not to leave so resolutely, asking him to at least give her a chance to make amends for the past. Yet, facing his once beloved wife, who is now drenched in tears, Edward does not show the slightest bit of emotion. He silently walks back to his room, and all those moments where he does not dare to talk back, those days of walking on eggshells everywhere, and that deep-seated resentment suppressed in his heart, now transform into a suitcase packed with absolute finality. Nevertheless, Grace still hopes that her husband is just playing a joke on her, praying that everything will return to normal once he steps out of the room. But the resounding slam of the door shatters her heart into pieces. Ultimately, Edward gets into the car that has long been waiting outside the door. As the tires crunch over the gravel driveway, his silhouette gradually shrinks into a blurry speck in the rearview mirror, without a single backward glance at the dust kicking up behind him. From that day on, this home completely loses its former vitality. Divorce papers gradually pile up by the doorway. No one ever cleans up the utensils in the kitchen anymore. The cold coffee left on the table is never replaced, and suffocating dust fills the empty rooms. Grace sits at the table with disheveled hair, staring blankly ahead with completely hollow and lifeless eyes. Edward takes away everything from this place, and more importantly, he carries away her very soul. Gradually, Grace's mental state deteriorates further and further, to the point where she begins to experience vivid hallucinations. Sometimes, she catches sight of Edward sitting by the window just like he used to, but after a brief moment of relief, that familiar silhouette vanishes without a trace in the blink of an eye. She dials Edward's number over and over again, only to be met with the icy tone of a busy signal. Later, when Edward changes to a new phone number, she loses even the shred of courage required to make a call. The collapse of this marriage is undoubtedly a devastating psychological blow to Grace. Unable to bear seeing his mother continue to spiral down, Jamie secretly tracks down his father, attempting to persuade him to return home and at least give his mother one more chance. However, Edward tells Jamie that a decision like this is by no means an overnight impulse. They once shared an incredibly blissful period of time, but with the passage of time, the fading of love, and the pressure of daily trivialities, the arguments and friction between them grow more and more frequent. With Grace becoming increasingly domineering, he finds himself utterly incapable of ever truly satisfying her demands or getting this marriage back on track, meaning their relationship is nothing more than a toxic, mutual entanglement. It is not until Angela appears that Edward gradually senses how life is not merely about mutual oppression, but much more about mutual understanding and support. Although he already walks away from that home now, he will still provide Grace with material assistance, except he is absolutely unwilling to ever go back to the past, let alone revive that suffocating marriage. As the days roll by, Grace remains deeply immersed in her agony, completely unable to extricate herself. She refuses to sign the divorce papers, even harboring a sliver of illusion that Edward will come back to her one day. She writes down her love on little sticky notes and plasters them over every single corner of the house, hoping only that Edward will see how much she loves him at first glance upon his return, so that perhaps he will not have the heart to leave. While she claims to love her husband on one hand, she bitterly hates herself on the other for sabotaging this marriage. Extreme love long since strips Grace of her sanity, and her fury occasionally spills over to affect Jamie as well. Because Jamie's personality closely resembles Edward's, as he always chooses to dodge the topic whenever a problem arises, and even his method of brewing tea is exactly the same. The highly sensitive Grace frequently fantasizes that Jamie will abandon her just like her husband did. To alleviate his mother's anxiety, Jamie takes her to a seaside spot called Hope Gap, because that place holds the most precious memories of their family of 3. Jamie also informs his mother that his father already decides to leave the house to her. Upon hearing this, Grace immediately dials Edward's number, wishing her husband would tell her himself, yet the other end of the line remains completely unanswered. Edward's resoluteness instantly shatters Grace's fragile self-esteem, prompting her to even turn her wrath upon her own son, blaming Jamie for knowing the new number but refusing to share it with her. Seeing that his mother remains just as domineering and self-centered as ever, Jamie finally reaches his absolute breaking point. Yet, even when everyone points out where the problem lies, Grace still refuses to accept reality. She tears open the mountain of divorce papers, and as she stares at the cold clauses inside, she still waits around the clock for that familiar figure to appear. However, as the days slip away one after another, a heavy sense of disappointment gradually builds up inside her heart. Watching his mother sink deeper into despair day by day, Jamie's inner self is also plagued by immense suffering. He has no way to convince his father to return home, nor can he help his mother break free from her pain, leaving him with no choice but to awkwardly navigate the agonizing space between them. Fortunately, after several rounds of internal struggle, Grace finally agrees to sign the divorce papers, but she demands to sign them face to face with her husband. When Jamie sees his mother again, her face actually carries a few hints of closure. Grace adopts a pet dog and goes as far as naming it Edward. Perhaps in her mind, a pet dog will remain completely submissive to her, just like her husband used to be, and will absolutely never betray her. That day, she deliberately brings the pet dog along to the law firm. Sure enough, the moment Edward steps through the door. However, when the lawyer informs her that Edward already leaves all his savings and the house to her, Grace unexpectedly refuses to sign the agreement, instead asking the attorney a completely unforeseen question. Grace's attitude remains just as unyielding as usual, as she foolishly believes that using this kind of self-deceiving method will definitely make Edward change his mind. To her surprise, Edward grabs his briefcase without a shred of hesitation, entirely unwilling to entangle himself with her any further. Even though Grace drops her past arrogance and humbly begs Edward to change his mind, how could a man whose heart is completely set on leaving ever turn back? The exact moment Edward turns his back, their marriage officially comes to a definitive end. The following morning, Jamie wakes up only to discover to his shock that his mother, who usually guards the front door, is nowhere to be found. A dark sense of foreboding instantly rushes into his heart, forcing him to dash out of the house in a frantic search out of fear that his mother might do something extreme in her despair. It is not until he reaches a cliff by the sea that he finally spots his mother's solitary figure. Grace possesses no remaining attachments to this world, as she stares hopelessly out at the vast, boundless ocean. Witnessing this, Jamie hurriedly calls out to his mother. As Grace turns around, Jamie looks at her once radiant face, which is now completely written with the heavy weathering of time and sheer exhaustion. This time, under Jamie's patient persuasion, Grace finally steps down slowly from the edge of the cliff. Feeling an overwhelming ache for her, Jamie wraps his mother in a tight embrace. This kind of care provided by her son offers Grace a profound sense of security that she has not felt in years. To soothe the trauma in his mother's heart, Jamie brings Grace back to Hope Gap once more. Here, Grace finally confesses to her son that she once contemplated ending her own life, simply because she cannot bear waking up every day to face nothing but an empty bed, with no one ever standing by her side to brew her tea anymore. Knowing his mother's immense pain and internal struggle, Jamie stops forcing her to put on a brave face. It is only at this exact moment that Grace realizes her life does not solely revolve around Edward, as she at least still possesses her son's love and companionship. Feeling as though she just jolts awake from a nightmare, she tightly embraces her son, and her heart, which has been shrouded in grief for so long, finally clears away the fog to see the light of day once again. With Jamie's encouragement, Grace begins to try stepping out of the house to interact with the outside world. She signs up for a radio friendship hotline, dedicating herself to helping those who suffer from emotional setbacks, just like she did. While listening to other people's stories, she gradually sorts out her own emotions and starts learning to let go of the past. She even picks up her pen once again, transforming her recent periods of pain, struggle, and rebirth into a series of essays. She hopes that through her own journey, she can help more people trapped in emotional distress, letting them understand that even if a marriage shatters, life still holds plenty of hope. After some time passes, Grace finally gathers her courage and decides to pay a visit to Angela and Edward. She follows the address and tracks down Angela's home. She wants to see exactly what kind of woman takes her husband away, and even more so, she wants to understand what kind of life Edward is actually pursuing. Edward appears completely caught off guard by Grace's sudden visit. Only then does Grace discover that the environment here is completely different from her former home. The furnishings are simple, even a bit cluttered, lacking any exquisite decorations or expensive furniture, yet radiating a sense of casual ease and freedom. She suddenly understands that what Edward wants has never been a luxurious life, but rather a space that allows him to feel relaxed and free. Just at that moment, Angela steps out from the room. She wears simple loungewear without showing a shred of hostility. Catching sight of Grace, she offers a polite greeting. Even though Grace believes she can face this with indifference, looking at the woman who steals her husband makes the rage inside her heart impossible to suppress. She desperately wants to give Angela a fierce tongue lashing, but after a brief moment of rationality, she forces herself to swallow it back down. Eschewing any excessive arguments, she instead carries a sense of relief and liberation, gracefully choosing to walk away in silence. Seeing this, Edward hurriedly chases her out the door, expressing his hope that even if they cannot be husband and wife, he can still maintain a friendship with Grace. Perhaps at this very moment, she still fails to comprehend her own dominance in that marriage, just as she fails to understand that Edward has always played the role of the suppressed partner. We always assume that longevity in a marriage is the ultimate proof of love, yet we forget that during 29 years of companionship, if nothing remains but silent compliance and tense friction, no amount of time can ever bridge the massive gap between two hearts. Grace treats love like sand held in her hand, where the harder she grips, the less she can hold on to. Edward hides inside the shell of silence, assuming that running away can bring tranquility, which ultimately leaves them both trapped in place. In reality, every single one of us makes similar mistakes in relationships, mistaking what I want for what you should do, and turning an unwillingness to fight into a refusal to communicate. It is not until the cracks violently rupture one day that we finally understand marriage is never about one-sided compromises or constant demands, but rather about two souls willing to shed their armor and witness each other's vulnerabilities. Just like Grace ultimately realizes that true rebirth is not about holding on to someone, but rather about letting yourself go.